Hi, this is Bob Wells here, and welcome to Undercurrent Stories. This is the show where we hear about people's interests and uncover some fascinating stories at the same time. I hope you enjoy today's show. Hello and welcome to Undercurrent Stories. In today's show, I'm joined by Jaega Wise. Jaega is a beer brewer, TV and radio presenter, musician, and has also more recently become an author with her latest book, Wild Brews. Hello and welcome to the show, Jaega.
Hello, and thanks for having me.
No, it's great. Really, really good that you've come on. So obviously we've had a bit of a difficult time over the last couple of years with COVID, etc. We seem to be coming out of it, I think. How have you found it?
I think it's been really tough. I think it's been really tough for everybody. It's just, I think it's hit everybody hard. And at the moment, with the increased costs going around on top of 2 years of COVID, well, more than 2 years of COVID, this cost of living, it's definitely causing issues. But we are certainly, and I'm certainly trying my best and our best at Wildcard to kind of pivot and to do things to the best of our ability. And we're doing well, but I'm not going to lie, things are really tough across the whole sector.
Yes. Yeah, well, one thing I did notice is that you've always traditionally tried to keep your beers for the local people at a sort of market level that is competitive.
Yes. So it's one of the things that we do. So we have two ranges. So we have the core range, and we always try and keep that really nicely, sharply priced. We want everyone to be able to drink our beer. It's not something just for the kind of rich elite. And that's not who we are, and that's not what we're about. No. But we have our kind of specials program, our kind of higher end beers that literally cost a lot of money to make. And that's the beer that we can kind of go crazy on, and does cost a bit more. But I think it's important to have a healthy balance of it. And I think it's why we've always been so keen in our tap rooms to always make sure we sell like thirds of things. Yes. Because a beer is like really, really fancy and it is a pricey pint, like people want to try it. So you should be able to access everything that we make. And that's always been really, really important to us. Not pricing our customer out the market.
Yeah, no, that sounds good. So before we talk about your new book, Wild Brews, and a bit more about beer, can you please just tell us a little bit about yourself and, you know, your life's journey and how you became interested in beer, please?
It's kind of hard to pinpoint when you become particularly interested in beer, isn't it? So I'm from Nottingham, so beer is very just around. Yeah. It's just kind of, it's in the background of your life, if that makes sense. So it's the home of kind of the cask pale ale. Milds are a big thing. Going to the pub with your mates is a big thing, as I'm sure lots of youths are up and down the country. So I was introduced to real ale fairly early on, actually. But I would say the first beer I ever had was certainly lager. It was a tinny in the park with my friends. And at the time, I probably didn't think too much of it, to be honest. But you know, when you're underage and you're drinking, it's anything's good, right? So that was probably my first beer experience, just like most people. I went to Loughborough Uni. I was studying chemical engineering. I was homebrewing with some friends at the time, not thinking too much of it. Then I graduated, moved to London. The same friends were like, we're thinking of starting this brewery. And I just unceremoniously quit my job, which is very unlike me, and got a job in a pub. And then I just said, I'll help you out. And then I was just like, just let me do it.
So there must be some sort of similarities, I guess, between what you did at university. It was chemistry, was it?
Well, it's actually chemical engineering.
Chemical engineering,
brewing is a subsidiary of that.
Yes.
So, brewing is absolutely part of that world. So it's not something we did a lot of. We did a lot with the other parts of the food industry. But we did study like fermentation and all that sorts of things. How enzymes work on a big scale. We did a lot of work back then that I didn't realise was going to be the foundations of a lifetime. But just a massive big up to Loughborough University. Woo!
Yeah. Because a lot of people go up to the place at Edinburgh, don't they, to do their brewing degrees?
Yes, yeah. So there's Heriot Watts. There's all sorts of places. Nottingham has a really, really good brewing school. But the wonderful thing about beer is I've met some amazing brewers who are trained to the highest level it's possible to be trained at. They are beer masters. They have degrees coming out of every orifice. And I've met people who are great brewers who don't have a qualification at all. It's one of those things where you can learn. Yes, you can go the studying route, or you can just learn from someone who's a really great brewer. And you can do it both ways, and they're both fantastic ways to do it. I think the tricky thing comes with if you don't study, is the repeatability is one. And the other one is being able to do it on a really, really big scale, the same thing over and over again, and to be able to do it in a way that's consistent. But I mean, I've met brewers of all ilk, of all education levels, and it's one of the things that's kind of great about beer is it is a science, but you can totally read about it on the side. But it is also, to a certain extent, an art as well. So a lot of creativity is involved as well. So I think it attracts all walks of life, potentially.
Yes. And you sort of touch a raw nerve there, because as an amateur brewer myself, what I find, I've done about 67 brews now. I'm not counting. But, Wow. I do find there's so many variables involved. You've only got to do something slightly different, like, mash it at 67 rather than 66. It does definitely have a difference. And that's just one variable.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And it's that across every single part of the process. It's actually quite nuts, actually, just how much a 1 degree mash temperature or 2 degree mash temperature makes such a big difference. And it's something that I certainly play a lot with my end when we're trying to make those really juicy, really hazy IPAs. Being like super hot on the mash is one of the techniques that helps you get there. And sometimes, obviously, doing that on a large scale is not always easy to get to those temperatures, especially our kit. So we have a single infusion, 100% manual kit. So it's us pouring in grain by hand, us measuring our temperature with a temperature probe. There's no bells and whistles on the kit at all.
So does that mean that once the water, the liquor, you call it, don't you?
Yeah.
Once the liquor goes in, that you can't vary the temperature once it's in the mash tun?
Oh, but you can. But it's a lot easier to get it right the first time.
Yeah.
It's a lot easier to get it right the first time. So so I think a lot of it is to do with just making sure you're always measuring.
Yes.
Because things go wrong all the time in brewing. And it's not so much the mistake, it's how you recover from the mistake. Yeah. So if your mash is too cold, what do you do? It's really simple. You add hot water. If your mash is too hot, what do? You leave the lids off, or you stir out some of the heat. There are lots of things you can do. And it's about just problem solving, I think, is the key word.
Yes. So just while we're on, a bit geeky about making beer, something that I think we have quite a few listeners who do brewing, so they'd be interested in this. How important is the mash pH? We're sort of told between 5.2 and 5.6, and inevitably, for some reason, my pH seems to come out at 5.6, 5.7, 5.8.
Oh, okay. You need to look at So, if you, my new book, Wild Brews, it talks about this in detail.
Does it?
So that's all about your water chemistry and your mash chemistry. So it's really important. I like to say between 5.2 and 5.5 pH. And what I found is it's just the most important part of the whole brewing process is getting that right. And if you're between those two magic numbers, then your beer, the chemistry throughout the rest of the beer will largely be fine, unless you do something stupid. Not stupid, but like Yeah, but it'll largely be fine.
Yeah.
But getting between 5.2 and 5.5 is absolutely key and vital. And I talk about in the book things you can do in order to help you get there, and in order to help you get there consistently, how water chemistry works. If you're in different parts of the country, things you need to be doing with your water differently. And I think, I know certainly when I was starting out, it can be quite hard to find tomes that talk about this kind of thing practically.
Yeah.
There's quite a lot of theory out there, but you really want someone saying to you, oh, put in 10 mil of X.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
In order to help you. So I really focused on that because I think it's so important.
Yeah, well, I got one of these Murphy's water reports because I live in a very, very hard area near Peterborough. And it's one of the hardest areas in the country, probably similar to Nottingham. I'm not sure. Or is Nottingham more Burton-on-Trent type water?
You know what? I haven't actually brewed much in Nottingham.
No.
I've not really brewed much in Nottingham at all. So I actually have no idea.
No. Well, the point I was going to make was that the report that came back, it suggested, if you wanted to change the water to make an IPA or a bitter, you needed to add a bit of this and a bit of that. But of course, because it's so hard, it goes off. It doesn't even say what you do with lager. I think it just says you don't do it, but or use reverse osmosis water. But I like to use the water that's available, really.
Yeah, I mean, the key thing is to have those numbers.
Yeah.
To know what's actually in your water report. I think that's key. I kind of take the guidance with a pinch of salt, simply because there's lots of modern styles that aren't necessarily taken into account in those quite traditional add so many mil of so and so much gram of calcium chloride, etc. So have a starting figure of things you want to achieve. So you want your magnesium to be this, you want your sulfates to be this, your alkalinity to be this, and a goal, figures of what you want to achieve. So look online. Yeah. I want to make a New England IPA. I want my water profile to look like this, right? And then try and get to that number, if that makes sense.
Yes.
So adjust your water accordingly to try and get to the ideal figures. Yeah. And if you buy any of these chemicals, it'll say on the back of the packet, if you add one or however many 5 grams of this will increase your X compound by X amount, and do it that way. And that's been super successful for me. And because I also brew in London, so it's a really, really high alkalinity down here. And just trying to work with the water with no equipment has been...
So you actually use London water. You don't use reverse osmosis water or anything like that?
No. I use I use the tap in my brain. But I'm quite lucky. So I used to work for General Electric's water division, and they make you do something called a mobile flow school, which is you basically have to study everything about pretty much water and how it works, and hardness and that sort of thing. But I always say to people, if you don't know about water chemistry, don't care about water chemistry, I think the easiest thing you can do is just boil your water. So use pre-boiled water. Yeah. And then that will help you quite a lot, because it will help you with your temporary hardness to drop out. But read the book. It says lots about it.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I'm definitely getting the book. I have to say, I could talk about this forever, but this show goes out to a lot of people who are just interested maybe in beer. So perhaps we should move on. So Wildcard have won many awards for their beer. That must, and I guess you've sort of already answered my question in terms of you're paying attention to every little detail of it, doing the best that you possibly can. And I guess that is that what makes the difference between good beer and great beer, do you think?
So I think you can do everything technically correct and still get good beer. I think the difference between good beer and great beer, it's just that something extra, isn't it? It's that something you can't quite put your finger on. You're not sure what it is, but it just makes you feel amazing. And it's just something that's hard to describe and tastes great. And that's always what I am searching for. And that's constantly what my team is searching for. So we taste everything in the tank on a Monday morning. So absolutely everything gets tasted kind of in a sit down, like 2-3 hours. And we will talk about the how everything is going and the fermentations. And obviously we taste throughout the week as well, but that's kind of our main sit down. And we're always kind of searching for greatness, if that makes sense. And I think it's that quest. And I think it's certainly that quest that kind of keeps me interested, because every single beer you make, you have another opportunity to try and get there, if that makes sense. And I think it's never. I think it's certainly me or my team or Wildcard just never letting go of that. You're always trying to reach something that's just slightly out of reach, always. And I think that's important, to not rest and be like, we're done now, we're great now.
So I guess you're creating new beers all the time, but you also have a staple number of beers that you produce.
Yes, the core range.
Yeah, and you're still trying to improve those, are you, as well?
Yeah, constantly. So wow. That's our IPA, our pale, and our lager. I'm really happy with all three, actually. But with that, so you get loads of changes seasonally. Seasonally. You get loads of changes in hops and barley and the weather, the bloody weather. So that is more about constantly comparing it to a standard, if that makes sense.
Yes.
And being like, this tastes a bit different, but noticing that early in the fermentation, so you can make changes as you go.
Yeah. So if you were to order some Citra hops, and I use Citra as a sort of example, that were harvested in 2021, another batch in 2020, they could taste different.
Absolutely, and it would taste different according to which supplier you bought it from.
Wow.
Yeah, so absolutely. So it's important you're in touch with your raw materials, and you're smelling them and you're tasting them, and you really know and you know what's going on the supply side, because it absolutely it varies from supplier to supplier.
Do you tend to use leaf hops or pellets?
So because our kit is so traditional and it's so manual, I use leaf on the hot side and pellets on the cold side, but varying different types of pellets. But I learned really early on that when you add leaf in the as a dry hop, it floats, which is no good. But yes, it's because I enjoy the extra filterability you get from leaf in the kettle on the hot side.
Yes,
but that's largely because our kit is so traditional.
Yeah. So what sort of size is your brew house?
So we're 12 barrel. Which means we can make 2,000 litres at a time. Yeah. And we're currently brewing every day, apart from weekends. We do the occasional Sunday, but we really try really hard to just, the weekends is off for everybody. Certainly in the brew house. So we kind of plan things accordingly. And occasionally, if we have a big job on, someone will have to do Sunday to Thursday instead of Monday to Friday. But I try and keep that under control.
Yeah. So what type of beers, if you were to go out of an evening or even a lunchtime, what type of beers do you drink? Do you tend to drink a wide variety, or is it something that you would have as a go-to beer?
Can I be perfectly honest with you? I think it depends what kind of mood I'm in. So I'm on a thing where I always like to try something new, something I've not tried before, which I really enjoy doing when you're kind of, especially at like craft beery places with lots of choice. But one of my favourite things to do, honestly, is just go to the pub and have something local and something fresh. And it's something that I love, a pub that supports its local breweries. And often it will just taste best just simply because of the freshness. And it's likely to have been brewed in the last few weeks,
Yeah.
and like wrapped recently and sent to the local pub. So it's one of the things, I love a pub that supports a local brewery. I really do.
Yeah. No, I totally get that. I mean, I sort of, when I grew up, it was basically lager and just bitter, mass-produced stuff. And then sort of 2010 discovered Brewdog, got into craft beer in quite a big way. But and I still drink them, but I've actually returned to some basic bitters. So I was down the other day trying some Harvey's Best Bitter. Beautiful stuff. Simple.
Yeah, I had a
really
pint of that
tasty
recently as well. And I was reminded, oh, yeah, this is great.
Yeah. No, that's what. But then on the other hand, I tried some Dubel, the not elder. They do an elderflower one, but one with I can't remember what was in it. Passion fruit or something. That was quite interesting.
Nice. But you know what? Sometimes the taste buds want what the taste buds want. Sometimes you just want a pint of bitter or a pint of lager, and you want to sit in the sunshine, and you just want simplicity.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's the best thing you'll have drunk all week, and it would just taste incredible. It's one of the great things about beer. I mean, you can go as complicated as you like with it, or as simple as you like with it. It's really great.
Moving on from the production of beer and beer itself, you've had some great reviews on the Prime Beer Masters program.
It's been mad, isn't
with
it?
James Blunt. Can you tell us about that, please?
What, the reviews?
Well, yeah.
I've been keeping a close eye on. I have been keeping a close eye on the reviews. Do you know someone called me Jaega Thighs?
Jaega Thighs.
I actually was like, you cheeky, but also I don't not enjoy it. So I thought that was quite funny. No, it's been received actually really well. It was such fun to make. I mean, you get to travel around drinking beer. You get to work with amazing home brewers who are just so exciting, and their energy is just so fantastic to be around.
They were all great, those guys, weren't they? The home brewers themselves, full of enthusiasm.
So much enthusiasm and so many ideas. They're kind of overflowing with ideas.
Yeah.
And in a professional setting, you do have to harness that.
Yes.
And it's always really exciting when you have someone in the team that's really like new to brewing, not new to brewing, but like they're very like young on the scene and really enthusiastic because they are just brimming with ideas. But it's about like taking that and harnessing it and using it in a way that's into something that's like really like sellable, if that makes sense. Or if it's not everything is super sellable, but I mean in a way that gets you a really delicious product at the end of the day. So kind of working with those ideas and I just loved working with everybody, and I love the fact that you got to see everybody week on week.
Yes,
and you got to know them, and it wasn't a manner of week one someone's eliminated and then you never see them again. I love the fact that you really got to know them and you got to know their story, and how some of the weaker brewers in the beginning ended up super strong in the end, and
they did,
vice
didn't they?
versa. Some of the strong brewers in the beginning ended up super weak in the end. So it was just really interesting.
And I found James Blunt particularly entertaining.
Oh, he's great, isn't he? Isn't he great?
Yeah. Are there any plans for a follow-up series?
I have no idea. So I'm sure I'd be the last person to know, to be honest. So at the moment, it has just aired in Belgium. It's just finished its run in Belgium. It was on terrestrial TV, which is really good. It's still got to air in the Netherlands, Italy and France. So we're not even done with really season 1 airing properly yet. So
no. I
have no idea. Obviously, if they call, I am available.
Of course.
But I'll wait for the call.
Yeah. You can just tell us a bit about your book, Wild Brews. One thing that intrigued me was that it sort of focuses more on natural fermentation rather than traditional sort of adding, an item that's already been dried or something. Could you just tell us a bit about that, please?
Yeah, so it was... So I myself have quite an extensive barrel age program, and I've not actually released a huge amount from it, actually. So I'm literally sat in my office right now, and it's the office/warm room now.
Warm room, yeah.
Warm room. So it's the only place in this building that's actually got some warmth to it.
So just for any listeners that are unfamiliar with the term I'm familiar with the term barrel aged brewery. Brewing? What's the difference, or fermentation? What's the difference between that and traditional way that you would make it?
So what this employs, it employs bacteria and wild yeast in order to make beer, in some instances sour.
Yes.
In other instances, with like barrel aged beers, you might be looking for wood characteristic in the beer. It means working with fruit, and making things like saisons and farmhouse styles as well. I also cover Kvike beers in there as well. But what I really wanted to really focus on the book is just, I wanted to produce something that's useful
Yes.
for brewers, home brewers, and professional brewers to have around. That was my kind of my goal with it. It was because I want it to be worth its shelf space. So I really went back to the beginning, and I just spoke about like each ingredient. Like I said, I did quite an extensive one on water, like how to work with it from the very beginning, but practically. Hops, etc. Then I went through the typical like microorganisms that you would find in these styles. The actual difference between what does mixed fermentation actually mean? Like, we read about it all the time, spontaneous brewing, inoculated brewing, and just some of the differences between them. And then I've put some recipes in there. There's probably about 20 recipes in there. And I've used the old brew in a bag method in order to have it as accessible as possible. And I've said you should be able to make beer with pots and pans at home. This is not something, and it drives me absolutely nuts when people are really elitist about beer and about brewing. That's just not the case. You can make perfectly nice beer at home with pots and pans. Like I do it professionally with giant pots and pans here with no bells and whistles. And you really don't need all this fancy gear to make really, really nice beer, as long as you're sticking to some quite strong rules of thumb, basically. So we've gone through that. And then I spend a while talking about like working with fruit and different kinds of fruits in the market and the things you can buy and how best to use them, where to add them into the brew, dosing rates of different fruits. Then I talk about how to practically package. So cleanliness. I know it sounds really silly, but lots of people are very confused by cleanliness, and people get beers infected. And obviously the whole point of this kind of brewing is you want your beer to be funky. Yes. But you also want your beer to be funky if you aim for your beer to be funky.
Yeah, you don't want an antiseptic TCP taste.
You don't want an infection.
Which I've had a couple of times.
Oh, okay. And then I've gone on to talk about how to package, how to carbonate by hand, different methods of carbonation, but how to do it on a practical scale. And then at the end, I've finished it off with a barrels. I've done a section on barrels, how to work with wood. And I've also put a section on problem barrels. So if you have a barrel that's in a horrible state, it's been sat in the rain for a year, just how to deal with that and the things you need to do to get that barrel back in working order.
Oh, right.
And I finished it off.
Yeah, because you don't know where the barrel's been, do you, before you get it?
Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. The reality is, in beer, we often get the barrel. It's been through 2 to 3 to 4 industries prior to arriving with us.
Oh, right.
And often they can be in really bad nick. Often they're leaky. They leak. So even that, if you don't know that's going to happen, and you put your beer and it just leaks all over the floor, that can be quite challenging. And obviously at home, you have things you can work with. You can have chopped up staves, you can have wood chips, you can have all sorts of things you can work with. So I really spent the time covering both, just because I wanted it to be useful to both homebrewers and professionals as well.
I was going to say, it sounds to me that you've come from a homebrewing background, you've got all the science behind you. You work in a professional brewery, so that book is obviously going to be very good for homebrewers, but also professional brewers as well.
Yeah, I mean, for me, there's not much difference, to be honest with you. I homebrew
No.
all the time, but it's the same stuff applies. Like for me, there's not. I don't differentiate in my mind like that. To me, there's three methods of cleaning something. It's physically clean. It's also chemically clean, and then microbiologically clean. And they're the three methods. Different equipment needs to be cleaned to a certain stage. And I do exactly the same at home as I do at work. Just at work, I have a spray ball and a pump and a CIP system. But it's the same theory.
Yeah.
It's no different.
No. Same principles.
And then I finish it off with when things go wrong, which I thought was quite fun, which is basically off flavors, how to recognize them, where they've come from, and how to fix them, how to pull your beer back from the brink if it's possible. Sometimes it's possible, sometimes it's not possible. The bit off flavor you mentioned before, the chlorophenol, in my experience, that's not possible to pull that back from the brink. But there's certain things you can do in the future to prevent that from happening. And it's X, Y, and Z to prevent that. So, and it's the kind of information that's just taken me so long to learn, but I've learned it practically over the years. And
do you talk about sorry to interrupt you. Do you talk about astringency? Because that's something I battled with, because I think I was probably over sparging.
So I talk about what do I talk about astringency? I don't talk about that in the way that I talk about that in the water profiles.
Yeah.
If you're over sparging.
I think I was. Yeah. I was trying to
always make sure you're testing your gravity at the end of the sparge.
Yeah.
You don't really want to go below about, I'd say to be safe, like 10.7.
Yeah.
You want to keep it really above about 1.007, 1.008 in gravity of your last runnings.
Yes.
That will help. That will largely be your water chemistry there if you're suffering from astringency.
Yes. Interesting stuff.
Read that chapter; it'll help.
Yeah. Well, I'm certainly going to get the book. That's for sure. So, how did you find your experience as a writer? Is it the first book you've written?
It's my first and will be my only.
Oh, really? My next question was going to be, what plans do you have for future books? But I think you've answered that.
No, I mean, I said that really strongly in probably a way that I shouldn't. But like, I'm not a writer. I am technically now a writer, but I found it really tough. I found it really tough. Yeah. It took me 3 years to write it. My publisher, I'm sure, wanted to wring my neck. But no, I just really struggled with and you'll read it in the tone of the book. It's not that normal of a tone. It's just me just like chatting away.
Oh, is it?
It's basically me chatting away in a book, being like, don't do this.
A bit like this.
Do this. Or, you know what I mean? It's very chatty. Yeah. And I don't know if that's right or that's wrong, but it is what it is. And hopefully people read it and they like it and don't find me incredibly irritating. So
I look forward to reading that, and we'll put the links in the show notes as well, Jaega, for you.
Thank you.
You're very well known and respected for your campaigning on various issues within the beer industry to do with sexism, race, and disability. Can you just tell us about some of those issues and some of the successes of the campaigns, please?
Yeah, so it's been a long while, and there are lots of other women and lots of other people in the industry also working on the same thing at the same time, which is really good. You know what it is? A few years ago, I kind of made a point of talking about the way women are treated in the industry, the way women are viewed in the industry, the lack of my peers being women, so people who I hang out with who are also head brewers, like the lack of kind of females represented in that space, and it got a bit of attention, and you call out the same people who you think, oh well, you should change this and you should change this, and then kind of the subject was put to me, well, Jake, if you want to talk to it, come on board and help us change it.
All right.
So, which is always the harder thing to do. So I joined SIBA, the Society of Independent Brewers, our trade body. I spent a lot of time working with the Portman Group, who were, they're basically alcohol police. It's their job to say yay or nay is or isn't okay on branding. And I just spent a lot of time doing a lot of reading, a lot of work, trying to really change some of the rules in the rule book. Because it wasn't so much that the rule book didn't exist, it was the fact that women were not, the treatment of women was not like catered for. So, for example, prior to a couple of years ago, the only thing you couldn't do on a with regards to this subject, the only place where sexism was even vaguely touched, there was a line in the rule book that said you're not allowed to claim sexual success on alcohol packaging. And that meant that you're not allowed to say, if you drink this bottle of cider, you'll get laid. You can't say that, right? But you can, like, according to the rules, be sexist, homophobic, all of these things, and it's not covered at all. Like you could do it. And that was largely the reason why, well, not largely, but you could have really sexist pump clips. You could have really grossly sexist cider labels. You could have homophobic or racist packaging on alcohol in the UK. There's literally nothing in the rule book that said you could. So it was really just like campaigning and working on getting that added to the rules. And we were successful in that campaign. And it was me and many others. And our trade body at the time, because I was also with the trade body at the time, so I could lean on the trade body to also submit their application and that sort of thing. So I submitted my own application, put it out there for lots of members of the public to submit their application as well, because it's done on a complaint system. And they put it out to, but they basically put the question out to tender to review. Basically, should we add X to the rules? And that came back with a resounding yes, basically that you should add this. So that now covers all alcohol sold in the UK. But like I said, it works on a complaint system. So if you see something that's dodgy, complain to the Portman Group, and an independent group will investigate it and come to a conclusion. But I think largely because of all of the talk about it, I think now it's largely seen, especially in beer, as unacceptable. If someone even goes close to that area now, like it's just deemed as like, what are you doing? You know what I mean? It's seen as just like, oh my God, you're very old fashioned. Yeah, exactly. Like, what are you doing? Why are you trying to do this? Do you want to not sell beer? Like, it's seen as that now. And even getting to the attitude where we're kind of we're kind of self-policing in a way, where almost all brewery owners in the UK know if they do something like that will get them in trouble online, or that will get them in trouble somehow. Yeah. So it's been a massive shift, I think, in attitude, rather than there being that many examples of the change in the Portman Group's code having that much of an effect. But as I've always said, nothing makes it clearer than from a voice of authority, if that makes sense. Like it has to come from the voices of authority in our society to say this is not acceptable, for that really to take hold. So I mean, there's lots more to do.
Yeah, do you think that's happening at the moment then, in terms of authority? Do you think that message is being driven?
I think it's getting there, certainly. I think it's getting there. And I think I think it wants to be there. The industry wants to be there. But I think we're seeing a lot of backlash from hospitality, and rightfully so from hospitality, and some of the environments that people that work in that space have to deal with. I mean, I worked in hospitality for a long time myself. Like the thought of someone slapping your ass and the thought of that being taken seriously, or you being able to call the police for that, is just shocking. And I was doing a lecture with the Met, with the London Met the other day, and they were asking my opinion on this, and I was like, well, you guys don't take it seriously. The thought, and they were saying, oh, sometimes there's a lack of evidence, and I was like, no, there's not. There's 99% of the time there's CCTV in a pub. It's not lack of evidence. It's a lack of what women have to do to keep safe in these environments. Is the responsibility falls upon women, and I think that's true across all society. And I think it's something that needs to be addressed at a government level, and it needs to be higher up on the agenda.
Yeah, I mean, I was, I'm still pretty shocked the way things are now when I hear about things, and it hadn't seemed to have moved on since the 80s or 70s or whatever. Having sort of been brought up in the 70s and 80s, going out and stuff, I wasn't really aware of a lot happening, but actually it was probably, going on underneath, and now it's all been brought out into the open, and I'm not sure whether it's better or worse now.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think the awareness is probably better, but I still hear some shocking stories that are current.
Yeah, I think, and some of the stories that have come out is absolutely shocking. Yeah. Absolutely shocking. And am I surprised by any of them? No, not at all.
No. Anyway, you've got a wide variety of interests, and I just thought I'd just ask you one more question about the future. What sort of plans do you have coming up in the future? Are there any new projects that we should look out for?
Honestly, one day at a time. One day at a time.
Yeah.
One day at a time. What sort of plans? It's really hard to kind of pin that down. I'm working on lots of stuff with the BBC Food Programme, and that's really fun. I'm working on a show at the moment about muscle milk.
Muscle milk? Yeah.
Yeah, like protein shakes? Yeah. I'm working on a program about that at the moment. Right. So I might use myself as an experiment and then go to the gym, get hench, drink loads of muscle milk. I think that's going to be really fun.
That's interesting.
But yeah, just talking about some of the pressures, especially that are on men, to be buff, and this kind of Instagram culture, skipping leg day, all that sort of stuff. And I think it's a really interesting space to look at some of the pressures that, especially on men, in this space.
Yeah.
I think it's fascinating. But anyway, yeah, lots
going on. And any further plans for Wildcard? You can continue developing new beers, making your existing ones better. Any plans to expand?
Yes. So for me, we've been teasing our Cuvée Saison, which we put at Brew London about a week and a half ago. And we teased it at Brew London, and we teased it at another festival. So it's literally in the office with me now, actually. And I'm just waiting for labels to go on the bottle before we release that. I've got to package my Imperial Stout that's ready in barrels. That's really exciting. On site here, I've got lots of exciting beers I've been working on. Like the base beer is my interpretation of a lambic and a gueuze. I'm not going to call it lambic or gueuze because I know how Belgians are very touchy about that. So I'm going to come up with a different name for it. But yes, because I've been doing it for quite some time, all my blends are all ready and all packaged and everything. So it's now just a matter of just releasing it, really. So it'll be a case of watch this space from Wildcard and the fancy sour beers we've been doing. So you can buy all of our beer available from our web shop. So it's just type in Wildcard Brewery into Google.
Well, it's been really nice talking to you, Jaega, and thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for having me. It's honestly, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you.
Thanks very much. You have been listening to Undercurrent Stories. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please feel free to share the show link to your friends and family, and if you have 60 seconds, I will be most grateful if you would please rate and review. To hear more episodes, please subscribe to the show and visit undercurrentstories.com. If you leave your email in the link, we will notify you as soon as new episodes are released. Also, check out our social media links, details of which can be found on the show notes. Until next time, this is Bob Wells wishing you all the very best.